The morning of my wedding, I was sitting in a hotel chair with my hair half done and my dress hanging on the closet door. And I was on the phone with my lawyer asking whether a cohabitation agreement survives a marriage ceremony in the state of Texas. Not asking about the flowers. Not asking about the timeline. Asking Bridget Owens, who had been my closest friend for 11 years and my real estate attorney for 4. Whether the document we had signed 13 months ago would still protect me if I walked down that aisle in 3 hours. There was a pause on her end, the kind that has weight to it. And then she said, "Delia, what happened?" And I told her to give me 60 seconds, because I needed to say it in order. I was 32 years old. I had a corner office at an investment firm in downtown Austin, a savings account I had been building since I graduated debt-free at 22. And a bungalow in East Austin I had purchased with $195,000 of my own money. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Mine. I had a fiancé named Garrett Caldwell who I had met at a rooftop networking event on South Congress 2.5 years earlier, and fallen for the way you fall for someone when you're old enough to know what you're looking for, and you think you've finally found it. What I did not have. Sitting in that chair at the Driscoll Hotel at 8:47 inches the morning, was any idea that the woman who had just left my bridal suite had been sent there on purpose. Garrett Caldwell was not the kind of man who showed up loudly. He was the kind who showed up consistently, who remembered the name of your favorite coffee order and the anniversary of the day you got your promotion and the exact way you liked the windows open when it rained. I had been careful my whole adult life about who I let close, and he had cleared every bar I set, one at a time, without ever making it look like effort. That was the thing about him. He never looked like he was trying. I bought the house on Chicon Street 14 months before the wedding. 3 bedrooms. Original pine floors. A back porch that caught the evening light in a way that made Austin feel like it belonged to me personally. The down payment was $195,000, and every dollar of it came from an account I had been building since I was 22 years old. Garrett contributed to the mortgage after he moved in, and I want to be precise about what that means. His share over 13 months came to just over $18,000, which my records showed clearly, and which the cohabitation agreement reflected exactly. Bridget Owens had sat across from me at a coffee shop on East 6th Street, with that document between us and a look on her face that left no room for argument. She pushed it toward me and said, "Sign it. Not because he's a bad person. Because you deserve to be protected regardless of what happens." And I signed it without hesitating because Bridget had never once given me advice that wasn't right. I kept 3 copies of that agreement. One in the fireproof box at home. One with Bridget. One in the file cabinet at my office, on the 14th floor of a building I had worked my way into, over 9 years of building something that was entirely, unambiguously mine. Garrett knew the agreement existed. He had never objected to it, never brought it up, never once in 13 months suggested it bothered him. I had taken that silence as acceptance. I understand now that some silences are not acceptance at all. They are patience, the kind that waits for a more convenient moment to make its intentions known. It was 8:40 inches the morning when someone knocked on the suite door at the Driscoll, and the knock itself told me something before I crossed the room to answer it. Not hesitant, not polite, deliberate, like a person who had already decided they were coming in. Cassie went still behind me for just a second before I moved. Serena Caldwell was standing in the hallway in a full event dress, makeup done, hair set, and she stepped inside without being properly invited, placing a small envelope on the dresser without explaining it or looking at it again. She glanced at my mother Joanna and at Cassie and said pleasantly that she was hoping to speak with me privately for a few minutes. My mother started to say something. I caught her eye and shook my head once, and when the room emptied, Serena sat down in the chair by the window, folded her hands in her lap, and gave me the kind of patient look that belongs to someone who has been waiting for this conversation for a while. She said she wanted to make sure we were on the same page before things got official. She said the Caldwell family had ways of doing things that had held for a long time, and that Patricia needed support, and that it had always been understood that when Garrett married, his wife would help carry some of that weight. Sunday dinners, non-negotiable. Weekday appointments when Patricia needed a ride. The family's household finances, which the women had always managed, which Serena described as tradition rather than obligation, as though the framing changed what she was actually asking. I let her finish. Then I asked whether Garrett and I had discussed any of this, and whether he knew she was standing in this room right now. She blinked. Just once. Fast. She said, "These are family expectations. They don't need to be scheduled into a conversation." I thanked her, told her I would see her at the ceremony, and held the door open. She walked out and left the envelope on the dresser without mentioning it once. I stood in that room for 30 seconds after the door closed, running back through every word she had said and placing each one exactly where it belonged. The phrase that stopped me was, "when Garrett married." Not when we decided. Not when we both chose this. When Garrett married. Like my role had already been written before I ever walked in. I asked everyone to step out and give me 10 minutes. When the room was empty, I picked up my phone and called Bridget. Not to talk it through, but to verify one specific legal fact before I made any decision about the next 3 hours. She picked up on the second ring and I told her everything in order. No editorializing. The same way I would present data to a client. When I finished, she went quiet. Then, "Has Garrett said any of this to you directly?" "Any part of it?" "At all?" I said no. A shorter pause. "I'm getting in my car." I called Garrett next. He picked up immediately. And something in that immediacy felt wrong. Like a person waiting for a call they already knew was coming. I told him his sister had been in the suite. I told him what she said. I asked whether he had known she was coming and whether he agreed with what she laid out. What came back was not the silence of someone caught off guard. It had a shape to it, like something being decided. "My family just wanted to make sure you understood what you were walking into." I asked. "Walking into, or being walked into?" Nothing came back on that. He said the expectations had always been there and he had hoped once we were married, things would settle naturally into place. I asked when he had planned to tell me. He said, "Delia, it's our wedding day." I told him I knew what day it was. What came next was the sentence I have turned over more times than I can count. He said he had always known his family was a lot, but he believed I was strong enough to adapt. Not grow together. Adapt. The way you adapt to something that was never going to change for you. Bridget arrived in 20 minutes. Bridesmaid dress half-zipped. Heels in one hand. Hair curled on only one side. She came in, dropped her bag on the bed, pulled a document from inside it, and placed it flat on the table by the window without saying anything first. It was the cohabitation agreement, the notarized copy filed with the Travis County Clerk's office. And she pushed it toward me with 2 fingers, the way you slide something across a table when you need the other person to remember exactly where they stand. "Read it," she said. "Not because you forgot. Because you need to know what ground you're standing on before you decide anything." I read it. I knew every line. $195,000, 86.7% equity interest in my name. Garrett's contribution documented at 13.3%. Proportional and precise. When I looked up, she was watching me. Not my face. My hands. The way a lawyer watches for what the body confirms before the mouth does. I asked her what happened to the agreement if I signed the marriage certificate today. She walked me through it evenly. In Texas, a cohabitation agreement does not automatically dissolve upon marriage, but without a prenuptial agreement in place, community property law would complicate any future dispute significantly. "But if you don't sign today," she finished, "this document holds exactly as written. Completely. Pause 3S. I sat with that for a moment. Outside the window, Austin was doing what Austin does on a clear October morning. Bright and indifferent and beautiful in a way that makes you feel like everything is going to resolve itself if you just wait long enough. I knew better than to wait. The answer had already been in the room since the moment Garrett's silence told me everything he had chosen not to say out loud. I asked Bridget and Cassie to step out and give me 5 minutes alone with my mother. Joanna Marsh came back into the room and sat down beside me without asking what had happened. Because she had already read it on my face, the way she had been reading me since I was 9 years old, and she was the only parent left in the house. I told her the parts that mattered. Not everything. Just the shape of it, what Serena had laid out, what Garrett had confirmed by not denying it, what the document on the table meant for what came next. My mother is not a quiet woman by nature. She is warm and expressive and cries at things that don't warrant tears. But when something actually matters, she gets very still. She got very still. When I finished, she asked only, "What do you need from me right now?" I told her. She stood up, walked out of the room, and did exactly that. I sat alone for the first time all morning. I looked at the dress on the closet door. Ivory crepe, buttons down the back, fitted 3 times over 5 months. I thought about a night 8 months earlier. Garrett and I on the back porch on Chicon Street, and him telling me he admired that I never needed anyone to tell me who I was. I had taken that as love. I understand now he was measuring the distance between who I was and who his family needed me to become. And he had already decided that distance was manageable. He just hadn't decided to tell me. At 9:55, I picked up my phone and called Fiona, the event coordinator at Commodore Perry Estate, and told her clearly that the 11 o'clock ceremony would not be happening. There was a pause on her end, professional and brief, and then she asked whether I wanted to redirect guests to a brunch setup on the outdoor terrace instead. I told her yes. She said she would call me back in 10 minutes and called back in 8, which told me she had handled this before and handled it well. Joanna worked the room list from the Caldwell side. Cassie sent text to everyone else. 62 people were redirected without a public announcement, without a long explanation, with only, "The ceremony is not taking place. Brunch will be served. Thank you for being here." That was all anyone needed to know. Garrett called 9 times between 10 and 11. Patricia called 3 times. Serena sent 4 messages in sequence, starting with "what is happening" and ending with nothing. Just silence, where a 4th message never came. I did not answer any of them. I changed out of my wedding preparation, repacked my bag, and took one last look at the dress still hanging on the closet door before I zipped the garment bag closed around it. Pause 3S. Then I picked up my bag, picked up the cohabitation agreement from the table where Bridget had left it, and went downstairs to the lobby, because I wanted to be somewhere with an exit when Garrett arrived. Garrett arrived at the Driscoll at 11:40, still in his navy wedding suit, tie still straight, which told me he had not been able to bring himself to take any of it off yet. I met him in the lobby, not upstairs, because I wanted open space and a clear line to the door. He sat down across from me and said my name twice before anything else came out. The way people say a name when they are buying themselves a few extra seconds to find the right opening. Then he said he had not known Serena was coming to the suite that morning, and he said it first, before anything else, which was exactly the wrong thing to lead with if it were actually true. I asked him when he had planned to tell me. "Tell you what?" I said. "What Serena laid out in that room. Patricia's appointments, the household finances, the Sunday dinners, the expectation that my career would eventually become secondary to all of it. When was that conversation supposed to happen?" He looked down at his hands for a moment, then said he had always known his family was a lot, but he had told himself I was strong enough to handle it, that once we were married, things would settle into place on their own. I asked, "Settle into place for who?" Nothing came back on that. He said the house was meant to be a home for both of them. I said, The agreement says otherwise. He said they could revisit the agreement, and I told him we would not be doing that. His voice tightened after that. He said walking away from the wedding was reckless, that I was throwing away something real. I said, I'm not walking away from something real. I'm walking away from something that was never what it appeared to be. He called me 3 more times that afternoon. I did not pick up once. 3 weeks after the wedding, that did not happen. A letter arrived from Garrett's attorney. The argument was equitable interest, because Garrett had contributed to mortgage payments over 13 months of cohabitation. There was allegedly a basis for revisiting the equity arrangement beyond what the cohabitation agreement specified. It was the kind of letter that is written to sound more substantial than it is, the kind that counts on the other party not having their documentation in order. Bridget read it, set it down, and used one word to describe its legal merit that I will not repeat here. But her meaning was unambiguous. What Bridget sent back was not a letter so much as a full accounting. It cited Texas Family Code Section 4.001 on the enforceability of cohabitation agreements, attached the recorded deed with the proportional equity clause highlighted, and included a complete ledger of every mortgage payment made over 13 months cross-referenced against direct deposit records from both accounts, which showed that Garrett's total contribution amounted to 8.7% of payments made during that period. The response also noted, in language that was precise and final, that any claim beyond the documented agreement would require full discovery, including Garrett's personal finances and the internal financial status of his employer, a startup that had recently been the subject of unflattering coverage in the Austin tech community. Garrett's attorney did not respond after that. 12 days later, I received notification from the Travis County Clerk's office. Garrett Caldwell's name had been removed from the deed. The process took 5 weeks and cost a filing fee that Bridget refused to invoice me for, which is a debt I will carry for the rest of my life in the only way that kind of debt is worth carrying. Garrett moved back into his family's house in Round Rock within the month. The startup where he worked had its internal financial troubles confirmed publicly not long after, which had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the decisions he had been making long before I was in the picture. Serena lost 2 event contracts from people in the Austin professional circle who knew what had happened that morning at the Driscoll. Not because anyone campaigned against her, but because reputation in a mid-sized city moves faster than most people expect. Patricia never called again after the lobby conversation. The envelope Serena had left on the dresser that morning stayed sealed. I never opened it. Cassie drove back to Nashville the day after everything settled and sent me one text when she got home. You're okay. Not saying it to make you feel better. Saying it because it's actually true. Joanna flew back to Portland 4 days later and hugged me at the airport for a long time without saying anything. Which was exactly right. Bridget never sent an invoice. Not for the response letter. Not for the 5 weeks of deed work. Not for the 20 minutes she spent driving to a hotel on a Saturday morning in a half-zipped bridesmaid dress. I will owe her for that in the only way that actually means something, which is that when she needs me, I will already be in the car. Delia Marsh still lives in the house on Chacon Street, and I have made it entirely mine in the 14 months since. Not by renovating or redecorating, but by filling it with mornings that belong to no one's schedule but my own. The back porch has a teak table now and 2 chairs. One for me, and one for whoever shows up worth sitting with. The kitchen smells like the coffee I make the way I like it. And there is no calendar on the wall that I did not put there myself. I still read every document twice before I sign it. I still ask the 2 questions that most people skip. Is this written down? And did we both agree to this? Not because I stopped trusting people, but because I learned that clarity is not the opposite of love. It is what love looks like when it is being built honestly, with both people at the table, facing the same direction. Pause 3S, what I know now, standing in that kitchen on a clear Texas morning, is that walking away from something that looked like everything is not the same as losing everything. I kept the house. I kept the career. I kept Bridget and Joanna and Cassie. I kept myself, which was the only thing that was never negotiable. If this story touched something in you, I'm glad you stayed with it, because pieces of my own life live inside it. I hope you carry the part that matters most, that peace is not something you find after the storm. It is something you choose to protect, quietly, every single day, starting with yourself.